I figured the Scribble video would go over well, but god, you guys really were into that. Hello all the crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and let's talk about more fancy text effects. So, last we left off, I introduced the Scribble text rendering library, courtesy of one Mr. Juju Adams, and went over some of the basic things you can do with it, with replacing draw text for some fancy effects and slightly better performance and that sort of thing. And today we're going to be taking a somewhat deeper dive into the whole matter, and we're going to be talking about Scribble objects and different things you can do with that. So, if you haven't seen the first video that I made on Scribble, I recommend going back and watching that. If you've used Scribble in the past, a number of things have changed since the early days, including but not limited to the fact that you no longer need to define every single font yourself.
Hey.
And today we're going to be going and doing some more complicated maneuvers with this system. Instead of just straight up replacing draw text, we can use and store Scribble objects, which will allow us to have a little bit more control over how things are drawn. This is great. This is a draw text Scribble extended. Sometimes that's all you need. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to go and delete all this. I'm going to start from a slightly different perspective, and I'm going to say, let's call it var Scribble. I can't use that itself as a variable name because that is actually also a function name. Scribble object is going to be equal to Scribble, and this is going to take a string. Actually, the string that we're going to be working with is going to be the one that I'm drawing up here, storing in the text variable, and that's it. So this is going to create a Scribble object. You'll notice the lack of new. You'll notice the lack of the new keyword in this line. That's because the Scribble function itself is not a constructor, but it will return a new object. And you may also notice that there is a second optional argument to the Scribble function, the unique ID. You don't have to do this if you don't know what this is. You're going to be fine just leaving it out. This has to do with the fact that Scribble will cache objects. That's cache in the sense of temporary storage, not in the sense of like money. And I'm going to exit out of Steam right now because I'm getting a lot of those little notifications on the bottom of my screen right now, and it's slightly distracting. You can use the unique ID value to this function to essentially turn off the caching system.
Hey.
Doing so will have a slight impact on performance because Scribble won't go out of its way to reuse Scribble objects that have already been created, but if you're ever running into problems pertaining to having multiple copies of the same Scribble object, then you may need to give each Scribble a unique ID, like get timer for a unique timestamp or something along those lines. Anyway, what you can do with the Scribble object is you can use it like any other struct. You can use the dot operator and a number of methods on it. The first and most important one being draw. And this will draw a Scribble object on the screen. It takes two parameters. It takes an X and a Y. We'll give it... No, we won't give it 32, 32. We'll give it... What was, where was it drawn originally? Alright. The original text in this demo was drawn at this position. That will be 32 and 96 pixels from the bottom of the window. And we can hit F5, run the game, and we now have text being drawn. Now this is a little bit different from what I had before. You may notice the font is different. You may notice that the text is now red and white instead of black. You may also notice that if you were to do something like draw set color C_black, what was the other one? Draw set font. The game font, then this won't affect this won't affect Scribble. This won't affect the font and text color that Scribble is drawn with. We are now completely bypassing the built-in font and draw setting systems that GameMaker uses, and we are just we're completely going off on our own. And this is where, if you were previously drawing all your text in the game with just the draw text functions, replacing that with Scribble would start to become a little bit more work. So the second method of interest that we might want to call on a Scribble object might be Scribble objects.starting format, and the starting format method is going to set the default font and the default color of a Scribble object. The font You might want to just pass in the font asset as the first argument to the starting format method, but you actually need the name of the font in a string. You can't just give it the font asset itself. Can you? Unless that was changed. Yeah, Scribble will error if you try to give it a font name that isn't a font. And you also need the color, so we can say this can just be a color constant C underscore black if we want. You could make it something else, C underscore blue, C underscore red, C underscore white, whatever. And this will set the starting color and the starting font of the Scribble text. All right. So this is still a little bit different than what we had before. You might notice it's not wrapping. You might notice that the font colors are actually respected, which they weren't when I was using the simple draw text scribble function, and that is because setting the starting color of the scribble and setting the blending color of the scribble is slightly different, and that the starting format will determine the actual color of the font, and the blending color will multiply all text by that color. I believe what I said about that in the first video was that blending a color with black is something like multiplying it by 0. It's sort of the 0 identity of color, just with a vector of 3 components instead of a scalar. There's also, if you do want to blend the color of Scribble like that, there is Scribble object.blend, and to this you can give it a color. Let's say C underscore black. And an alpha. Alpha is transparency. We'll just make that 1 for now. If you want to fade or flash or whatever your text with transparency, you can use the alpha value. All right. So this doesn't set the font, but it does set our text to black, and it does not respect the color tags because the red color multiplied by black is just black. That can be useful for tinting an entire string of drawn text to a particular color. There are an absolute ton of methods that you can call on these Scribble objects. I am going to try and just focus on the important ones that I think most people are going to use in this video, and then later on I'll probably make more videos on Scribble with the more advanced and particular features that might be useful only in a couple specific situations. Let's take on text wrapping next. So if you want your text to actually wrap and not just exist on one line, you can use the .wrap method. So the arguments that you would pass to the wrap function are going to be, well, there's going to be one required argument and there's going to be 2 optional arguments. I'll start with the required one. This is going to be the width, so this is going to be the wrapping width. If you were to use the draw text extended function, the 2 arguments that go into wrapping text with draw text extended are the line separation and width. Scribble doesn't really worry about line separation. It just assumes that the spacing that you want to have between lines is going to be like the height of the text, although there is another method that you can use if you really want to change that. So the one that we're interested in is going to be the line width. So if I were to set this to something like, I could make it an absolute value. Let's make it 800. Or you could use something relative to the game window. If you're drawing this on the GUI layer, like window, I get width minus some amount. But I'll make it 800 for the time being. And this is going to cause the text to wrap. And there's going to be a line break inserted after 800 pixels, 800 units of width in the first line. And if you were to draw a longer string, then it would wrap multiple times. One of the optional arguments that you can give to the .wrap method is going to be the maximum height. This is going to be, and I will add some more text to this string. What's the next line of the poem? There once was a hero named Ragnar the Red who came riding to Whiterun from Ulrich's stead. I believe, and the braggart did swagger and brandish his blade as he told of bold battles and the gold he had made. That was an accident, but I like the tilde there because it sort of implies an inflection in the way that you're supposed to read it. We can make the word gold actually gold too. Anyway, if I were to run this now, the text would wrap somewhat off the screen, at least somewhat off the bounds of the text box, because there's 4 lines. However, if I were to set the max height value in the dot wrap method to something like let's say 64 pixels, that might be a little bit small, but this will cause the text to get cut off after that. So we only have 2 lines, and then after, on the 3rd line, the text would overflow the maximum height that we gave to the wrapping function, and it will just it just won't be it won't be there. And then lastly, we have an option to enable character wrap. By default, this is going to be false. Character wrap will cause text to be wrapped on each character instead of on each word. So by default, Scribble won't break up words as it does text wrapping. But if you really want to, you can set the 3rd argument to the dot wrap method to true, and that will cause characters to that would cause words to get broken up in the middle of them. And as you can see, this is going to be exactly the same number of characters, and the word writing is going to be broken up in the middle, which is, in the English language, not great, but certain international non-English languages, I feel like calling languages that aren't English international is a little bit disrespectful, because there's, from their perspective, English would be the international language. But anyway, for the non-English languages, sometimes you may want characters to be able to break in the middle. I believe a lot of the Asiatic languages, Korean, Japanese, that sort of thing, breaking words in the middle is considered the way that you're supposed to do it. And if you're writing a game which is primarily in one of those languages, or if you're writing a game which you're translating to one of those languages, you may want to set the character wrapping argument to true. I'm going to leave it off because in English that's a little weird. Next, there is the Scribble object.align method, and this is essentially the same thing as draw set h-align, draw set v-align. The draw set h-align and v-align functions for just drawing regular text in GameMaker. This is going to take 2 arguments. You probably know what they are. If you want to center text, you could set the horizontal alignment to fa_center. If you want to vertically align text, you could set the vertical alignment to fa_middle. And this is going to cause the text to be aligned to the center horizontally and the middle of the text box vertically. If I were to draw a circle or something, let's draw a circle at the position where we're drawing the text, we will see exactly where the text has its origin. Let's make the radius something like 8, and outline is going to be set to false. We're going to draw a filled circle, and this is going to allow us to see the origin point of this text, where that white circle is, see? Whereas by default, your horizontal alignment is going to be fa_left, and your vertical alignment is going to be fa_top, as you can see here. If you wanted to set this to something else, for example, fa left, but vertically aligned to the middle, you could do so. All right, and you can see where that white circle is. I feel like I'm going to, when I post this demo on the internet on GitHub, I'm going to leave this this circle here so that you can see where the anchor point is. But I also want it to be a little bit easier to read. And we're going to be drawing a black outline at that point, so that'll be a little bit easier to see. All right, much better. Again, this looks a little bit ridiculous in this demo case because when we have our text not aligned to the upper left, then it kind of looks like the text is spilling out of the text box. You could, for example, do something more like draw the text at position, window get width divided by 2, window get height minus 64 or something, and you could center align the text that way, and that would cause the text to be center aligned in the box instead of originated at the corner. But I'm going to not do that here. I'm just going to draw it in the corner with the original alignment. All right, what are some of the other methods that you might care about? First, I'm going to let's wrap the text at a slightly longer length so that it all actually fits in the text box here. All right, like that. And second, let's move this. Let's move that circle so that it's under the scribble text, and that it's not overwriting the text that's there. All right, great. I mentioned this earlier, so I guess I'll give it a full explanation now. If you want to set the line spacing for text wrapping, you can use the line_spacing method, and this can be a value. I don't know what is the default size of the font that we're using. It looks like it's about 20 or so, 16. So if I were to give this a really small line spacing, we would see that when the text wraps, it's going to sort of sit on top of text that was on the previous line like this. If I were to use a somewhat larger line spacing, you're going to see that the text is going to be spaced out perhaps a little bit too much. That's actually not that bad. That's not enough spacing to be like uncomfortable or anything. All right, that's getting a little weird. So you can use the .line spacing method to explicitly define how much space is between lines of wrapped text.
Hey.
You can also use the Scribble object line. What was the other one? Line height, which is similar. This is going to take two arguments. This is going to be a minimum and maximum line height. This is mostly something that you would use if you were using multiple fonts in the same text string that are of different sizes. I don't want to get too much into it here. Just for single lines of text with a single font like this, it's not going to do that much, I don't think. I could set a minimum line spacing to like, I don't know, let's say 12 and a maximum line spacing to 40 or so. And that shouldn't make too much of a difference in our case because our line spacing is just purely defined by the height of one font. So I won't include that here. All right. I'm looking through the list of Scribble methods for some more particularly fun ones. There is a .origin will allow you to set the origin of a Scribble object. By default, it's obviously originated at 0, 0. If you wanted to originate it at something like, let's say 100, 100, and draw the text as it is, this would cause the text to be slightly offset, and we can see that it's being drawn at a position that is originating at somewhere other than where the white circle is, where we're trying to like draw it in the .draw method. This could occasionally be useful. I mostly mentioned it because I was already talking about things like alignment, and this could play in interesting ways with text alignment. This is going to be way out there, isn't it? Yeah. It's not something I find useful very often, but I figured I'd give it a mention. And I had a list of the Scribble methods that I thought would be useful to talk about in this video before I went into it, but I'm looking over the complete list, and there's a lot of ones that I wasn't originally going to talk about that probably could be fun. If you're a fan of Bezier curves, you can define a Bezier curve, a cubic Bezier curve. You can have the text follow that Bezier curve. In other words, you can have text following a curved path. This takes 8 arguments, the x and y coordinates of the 4 different points that define a cubic Bezier curve. I'm going to have to take a minute to like come up with points that would actually like look good when you do this. So if you'll give me a minute. All right, that is Scribble following a Bezier curve. You can see the 4 controlled points, 8 different values defined over here on the side in Scribble objects.bezier. I don't personally have a lot of use for this, but I've seen in Juju Adams' Discord server, some people have posted some fun things that they've done with this. And if you enjoy having text following like paths that you might like be reminiscent of Microsoft Word, WordArt, or something like that, then this might be for you. It's also worth noting that the Bezier curve points are defined relative to the draw position. So if you were to like move the text around on the screen, you wouldn't have to change the parameters of the Bezier curve. You would just change the draw position, and the curve would move relative to that draw position. So you wouldn't have to like calculate the points every time whenever you want to draw text at a different location on the screen. It's probably for the benefit of all involved, because that could be fairly expensive if you do it a lot. I'm going to comment that out as well, because it's a little bit on the weird side, but again, it's kind of fun. It's a fun thing that you can do, and I couldn't resist including it. Next, there's a couple, this is going to be the last thing that I do in this video. There's going to be a couple of methods that you can use to access things such as like get wrapped, and this is going to return information about text wrapping. You can do .get text, which is the method that you should use if you want to extract the text from a Scribble. You are not intended to access any of the actual variables within, because that could well, if you try to set any of the variables directly, then things could go horribly wrong. But if you try to read from any of the variables, it's just kind of a good software engineering practice to not do that. There's also a few .get left and .get top, and so on and so forth. I believe get right, get bottom, width, height, that sort of thing. There's a few methods related to that, and I am going to use those. I am going to show off a little bit of draw set color C_black, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle that is going to follow the bounds of the Scribble object. So I could say x1 is going to be Scribble object dot. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard so I don't have to type it out every time. Dot get left. Y1 is going to be that dot get top. X2 dot get right. And Y2 is going to be dot get bottom. And outline only is going to be true because I don't want to draw like a filled rectangle over the very nice text that we just spent all that effort drawing. That is going to be in absolute terms, so I'm also going to need to... Alright, you know what? Let's do this properly. Probably should have written it like this from the beginning, but... Alright, we're going to actually store the coordinates that we're drawing in a variable, and that way I don't have to hard code a bunch of magic numbers that could cause problems if I forget to update one. Alright, and this is going to draw a rectangle around the bounds of the text, right? You can use this if you want to have other things being drawn around it, if you want to have a sprite being drawn at the end of every line of text or something like that. You could use the dot get width and dot get height methods instead. So you could define x2 and y2 instead of saying by Scribble object dot get right. You could say Scribble object dot get left plus Scribble object dot left plus get width instead. And that, in some situations, may be just as, if not more useful. Alright, it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna go with get right in this particular case because it'll be a little bit simpler. I believe there is one more method, which would be get bbox, which is the bounding box. And if you wanted to use this instead, we could say, let's say var Scribble. I'm just gonna call it, you know, instead of calling it Scribble underscore bbox, let's just call it that. And this is gonna equal Scribble objects dot get bbox. This is going to take an x and a y parameter. This is going to take an x and a y argument, and that's going to be text x, text y, and that is going to return a result that is relative to the position where that Scribble is being drawn with the text x and text y arguments, and that will save you the trouble of having to add like bbox left plus text x to put it in the screen space position. And instead of saying scribble object.getLeft, I could say bbox.left, and no need to add text left. Same thing for bbox.top, bbox.right, and bbox.bottom. And this will do the same thing, but we'll only need to call one method on the Scribble object, and that will return a struct containing left, top, right, and bottom. I think it also contains width and height. Okay, so the exact data that is returned by the getBbox method is a struct containing the left, top, right, and bottom, width and height, and also some absolute x and y values of the four corners, should you want that. Okay, x0, y0, x1, y1, and so on. Those are just points representing the four corners of the bounding box, which that could also be useful depending on what you need to do with this. All right. So one more thing before I go. Scribble is designed in what I believe the professionals like to call a fluid interface, and that means that every one of these methods returns a value, even if it doesn't appear to need to, such as .starting format or .wrap. These don't appear to really need to return a value, but all these methods return the Scribble object itself. So what you can do is you can, instead of saying Scribble object equals Scribble, Scribble object.starting format, Scribble object.wrap, you could instead say Scribble, and then the text argument, .starting format, and then if you don't include terminating semicolons at the end, you could continue and say starting format .wrap line spacing if you really want, and I'll just uncomment all these for the time being. .align .origin. If you're really going all in, you could also say like .bezier. Let's indent that a little bit. And I need to get rid of that semicolon, and I need to get rid of a couple semicolons. All right, like that. And this will chain all these method calls together. All right, so that's a little bit weird because the alignment isn't really where I want it to be. Let's decrease the line spacing a little bit, shall we? And this will produce the same result as it would if you did all these in one go. Scribble is designed so that you can just sort of append on extra attributes like this every single time you call one of these methods. And you don't have to do that, but you may prefer to do it that way if you have a lot of attributes that you're sticking onto each one of these Scribble objects. You could also take it a step further, and you could just call .draw on the end of that chain when you're done with it. And I'm going to let's turn that off and start the game again. This is going to cause oh, okay, so .draw actually doesn't return anything. I remember. Juju specifically mentioned that. I don't remember if it's in the documentation or if he was just talking about it on the Discord. Because doing something else at the end of .draw could cause problems, and that doesn't return a value. And in this particular case, the error message was trying to call getBbox on undefined because this wasn't assigned a value to. Anyway, so one other thing you can do is, instead of calling this code in the draw event here every time you want to fetch and draw a Scribble, you could instead let me Control X cut that. You could instead put this in the create event for an object, and instead of making it a local variable, you could make it an instance variable, and then you could just reuse the result of the instance variable. And that would be somewhat more efficient, but in this case, if I were to profile that in the debugger's profiler, you would hardly notice a dent because it's only a little bit of text being drawn. It's only a little bit of text being drawn. It's only one line. And it's also not very large text in the grand scheme of things. And Scribble in the background does a pretty good job of using its caching system to ensure that you don't have to regenerate text if you've already generated it like this, right? If I were to run this again, we would see that the performance according to the profiler would be about the same. And why was it in a different location? when I created it in the draw event. Was there a... Must be something to do with one of these settings that I was setting. But you'd see that it would be very, very similar, going from I think 160, 170 microseconds to 220 or so, which is not a lot of time at all. If I were to abuse the unique ID system to cause it to have to regenerate the Scribble, and let's do this with the debugger, please. If this would cause it to have to regenerate the Scribble from scratch every time, and this would cause it to be slightly more expensive. This is going to be a much more dramatic increase than we saw before, and this is basically, that's how much work Scribble does in the background to cache text so that it doesn't have to regenerate it all the time. So like it's rebuilding the vertex buffer from scratch when I do that, which is a bit of a pain. I strongly encourage you not to worry about the performance of Scribble. Again, Scribble does a lot of work in the background to make sure that it doesn't do more work than it has to. A few of the individual methods in the documentation do have warnings on them saying that this function is more expensive than most of the other ones. Some of the methods in the Scribble documentation do have warnings on them saying this method is more expensive to call than some of the other ones, but those tend to be more advanced. They tend to be the more advanced effects, and for basic stuff like this, you're going to have to do a lot of Scribble drawing before it has a noticeable impact on your game. The difference in what we saw earlier when I was running the game through the debugger was on the order of a couple tens of microseconds. If you remember the timing values in the debugger's profiler that I had up a minute ago, doing all of this only took about, what was it, 200 microseconds? If I were to do a little bit less in terms of weird alignment stuff, it would be much, much faster. Let's go back to what we had before originally. Something that actually looks like text that you'd see in a game. Okay, it's still about 200 microseconds, even with some of the weirder method calls being commented out. You would need to be drawing a lot of text before this starts to slow down. And generally speaking, in games, having a lot of text on screen at once is bad for gameplay purposes, not for performance purposes. Because if you give too much text to the player, they're not going to know what to focus on, and the experience is going to be dampened a little bit. But that's a game design topic. That's not a technical topic. I'm going to end things off here. This has been some of the getting to the more intermediate things you can do with Scribble. There are still a number of other systems that we have not even touched on yet. There is an entire typist system, which is for what everyone likes to call typewriter text, that I haven't even started to talk about yet. There is a pagination system so that you could have multiple pages of dialogue stored inside a single Scribble. You could cycle through them, showing one page to the player at a time. There's an entire event system, so if you wanted to have something happen when the typewriter uncovered a particular letter, you could have an event that runs on a particular character. I haven't even started to talk about MSDF fonts yet, multi-signed distance fields, which are fonts that scale better than just bitmap fonts that are what you usually use. And then there's a whole host of other miscellaneous things that I could go on for hours about when it comes to Scribble, because there's a lot to do here. And if I had to name a single user-created extension that I thought every GameMaker game could benefit from having, it would definitely be Scribble. So, let's stop it there. This recording went on for longer than I thought it would. I'm going to commit these changes. If you want the code for this, look for the GitHub repository down in the description of this video. I promise I won't forget to actually add the link for a month like I did last time. Also, the link to the Scribble GitHub page itself will also be down there. I forgot to say that at the beginning of the video, but it's down there. I'll probably have text on the screen at the beginning, reminding everybody that that's where it is. Otherwise, I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one tutorial like this, and one Let's Make a Game, currently Bullet Hell. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, there will be links to that in all the usual places. You can see some fun things like your name in the credits at the end of every video. About once a month I post a preview of my future plans, and sometimes I even stick to them. And if you wanted to pledge, I definitely would appreciate it. Otherwise, I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Then Nothing Happened, Squarecrow, Sindra Larson, Posho, Gunnar Clovis, GameMaker, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, and Army Armbruster for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end like this, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.